Hello, welcome to the Pop Off PC Mags Gaming Show, covering video games, news, trends, hot takes, wherever we got. Your usual host, Jordan Miner, is out today. He's been kidnapped by ninjas. Instead of saving him, we will have a show and talk about video games, specifically E3. I'm joined by Matt Buzzy.
Hello.
Also by Mike Williams.
Hello, hello.
And we're doing a wrap-up show. And specifically, we're going to talk about third-party games, be it the big ones or the smaller indie ones. So I'll turn over to you guys. Matt, Mike, what were some of the high points in terms of third-party companies this year?
I'm gonna say I was not surprised. I'm intrigued by the oddly named Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which I still haven't had a chance to play. When Square announced their game, which is being done by the Team Ninja team that was behind Neo and Neo 2, they also were like, the demo is available today, and then that demo was corrupted for the next like 2 or 3 days. It is working now. I'm looking forward to at least trying it. I have played Neo and Neo 2, and both of those are good games. Neo 2 improved on the first Neo's faults, and I think it's a pretty good game. And marrying that to Final Fantasy in general seems like a good idea. So I think that's potentially an interesting one.
There was some rumor of a Final Fantasy Souls-like bubbling as the lead up to the show. And
yeah, the rumor was pretty much spot on. They were like, yeah, it's a Souls-like Final Fantasy game, and they even named Final Fantasy Origin as like the title, which I think is Square was like, okay, then we got to throw something in front of it. Let's throw together like a couple of nouns, maybe an of or and we're good.
Perfect.
That's how you hype it up for E3. You throw a bunch of extra syllables for no reason.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else. Probably Far Cry 6, but we had already heard about that.
Yeah, Ubisoft's show overall was like checking boxes. Like it was like, yep, okay. Like, yep, that looks pretty good, but it was what we expected though.
Yeah. Great Ace Attorney is another one, but again, that's also one that like, oh, we already expected that. Generally, and then I mean, we'll get into it. I get the feeling that third parties just weren't ready for this. Like they didn't have anything that they hadn't already announced independently, and they were just doing it because it was E3 time.
Yeah, I felt the same way, specifically about Capcom's showcase. You know, I sat down, devoted like a good 30 minutes of my time, hoping to get some news on Street Fighter V because it's coming towards the end of its life. And though I did suspect that because Evo is coming up, that you wouldn't hear a lot about Street Fighter V,
right.
Like nothing. I expected something, and they devoted a majority of that Capcom time to was it a Monster Hunter?
Monster Hunter, yeah.
The RPG. And
Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin.
Right.
Yeah, I think the Capcom show overall got, even though they did tell people we have Monster Hunter and a couple other things like a Resident Evil update, and that's it. I think people were still the most disappointed.
I mean,
annoyed at that show's existence.
Yeah, the Capcom wasn't the worst. The two worst were Bandai Namco, which they also said like, look, it's just going to be House of Ashes, but it was weird for me because it started at like 5:25, not like 5:30. So like I got there at 5:30 and it was halfway into the interview, and then like 10 minutes later it was done, and I was just like, what is this over? Oh, okay. And then Gearbox had nothing.
That was probably the worst one. It was just a lot of watching Randy Pitchford
on set, like if you're gonna be on set, show us a costume at least.
None of the famous actors who were in that movie could get on camera for a second either. Like, yeah,
like you got Kevin Hart, but like show us Kevin Hart in costume or something. Like, get a little taste. And then they took Homeworld and like sliced up a
slice
full
of
trailer,
Homeworld, yeah,
and put it in between. It was so bad.
Yeah, it's something I think that, for some of these publishers, they really wanted to have a presence at E3. But I think in some cases, they may have been better served just like sending out press releases. Here's a YouTube video, and that's it.
A couple trailers. Yeah, I mean, Sony could have been there and shown some stuff off, but if they didn't have anything to show, they didn't have anything to show, and they just chose not to go and release.
Which is the smart thing to do. If you don't have anything to show, and I'm writing a thing about this, E3 is, especially digitally, E3 is not that important. But E3 as a whole over the years has become less important because you can show your games off at PAX, you can show your games off at Gamescom, TGS. You can just, if all you have is a trailer, you can just put it on YouTube. Like, tell everyone the trailer's coming, put it on YouTube, and that's like everyone will cover it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things with Sony. People were saying that maybe Sony didn't have anything to show, but Sony literally has their own showcases. They don't have to like be part of this news cycle. They can drop a video 2 weeks.
They made a big event about the New Horizon
Forbidden West like a week and a half ago.
They just did it.
Right.
They could have saved that for E3 if we're being realistic, but they just didn't. So what else we have? Ubisoft, we mentioned they had Rainbow Six Extraction, which is no longer called Quarantine for obvious reasons.
Right.
That MX game, Riders Republic.
That's on my list. See, thank you. See, I have to go through this mentally. Like Ubisoft, like I'm an open world guy, so Ubisoft is there. So like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I'm less excited about the next DLC coming. If you look at my preview of the first DLC, Wrath of the Druid, you can see that I categorize Assassin's Creed DLCs in two categories. There's the more of the same and the big swing, and it gets the big swing ones usually get real wild. And the first two DLCs they announced, neither of them looked like big swings.
You're waiting for the Atlantis of the Valhalla.
Right. Like Get Wild. Like Origins had the one where you went to the land of the dead, and that was that's what I want. And at the end, they were like, okay, we're gonna switch it up. We're gonna support Valhalla for year 2. So there's gonna be more DLC. And they briefly showed a mythical gate, which fans have found determined to be a gate to Muspelheim, which is one of the North realms. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. So, but I didn't get to see any gameplay about that, so I can't like get excited or anything.
Yeah, I think this is, though, of course, all still better than doing the annual Assassin's Creed plan that they had years ago. That was bad. So this year of support and then actually giving them time to build a new game is definitely for the best.
Yeah, so Riders Republic, Far Cry 6, probably, and then whatever the next DLC. That was probably my strongest thing for Ubisoft.
Like for me, like as someone who pretends to play bass on a semi-regular basis, the Rocksmith news was pretty exciting to me. Like they're already, before they announced it becoming a service, they were kind of selling, the DLC songs kind of piecemeal. They were really cheap, like $1 or $2. But the idea of like paying like one fee and getting like a group of songs, that sounds all right, especially if
it's like a hobby that you do, not like I need to keep buying DLC, which is how Rock Band and Guitar Hero went out eventually. Towards their end, that was just like, hey, buy another song, man.
Right.
It's much easier to set up $10 per month or whatever the price is going to be, and just forget about it and just keep playing your songs. And for you don't have to track down any new content, and for them, just get a recurring payment. So it's kind of win-win.
And they added tabs, which I didn't know they didn't have, but now seems really useful.
See, that shows how scrubby I am. I didn't know they were missing.
Yeah, I can't play any instrument, but I did see the tablature is there now, so that seems pretty helpful for learning how to play.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people say, "Oh, it's if you want to learn how to play, just go down to your local, guitar center and learn how to play." It's like, one, you got to pay for those lessons, which is, that's the price of the guitar itself.
Subscription.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good learning tool, and I think that with this, maybe it might entice more people to come.
Yeah.
So in terms of like any other big publishers. We tackled Capcom, touched on Square a bit, and Ubisoft. A lot of these games were like listed as like 2022. Like, were there any games that you're looking forward to are coming like this holiday season or just this year in general?
Far Cry. Okay, yeah. So Far Cry, Ubisoft was pretty much mostly, unlike the rest of them. I think they have a large enough stable of studios that they can be like, okay, we're only going to talk about the stuff that we're releasing this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Rabbids, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope was the only game that they're like, this is 2022. We don't even have like a window, like a for it or like a quarter or anything. All the other stuff was stuff that we already knew about or slight announcements on. So like Rocksmith Plus coming this year, I think they said. It's starting beta.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Far Cry 6 they already had in the hopper. Rainbow Six Extraction they already had in the hopper. The Assassin's Creed DLC, like, again, they had already announced that. So most of their stuff was like, hey, this is what we got.
Yeah.
I feel like Square maybe has more stuff further out.
I think Guardians is coming out in October.
Yes, that's the
Guardians of the Galaxy is coming out, and poor Marvel's Avengers continues to limp into. Remember the Spider-Man, the PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man edition was supposed to be coming in the first quarter of this year, and they haven't even talked about that. Like they haven't like said a peep. They haven't been like it's coming. It's just quiet.
Yeah, all the world was thrown in chaos for a year, and all the schedules have been rearranged and tweaked, and
Yeah, I think we can say also as far as what companies had to show and what they maybe disappointed people with. I think reminder that we should be more understanding with
and
like they had to do E3 and having a lot of their actual original plans disrupted for what could be at this show and what was actually feasible to launch in 2021 that they really thought would launch in 2021 and didn't make it out.
And that's part of the thing I'm sort of getting into the op-ed. Like, yes, the pandemic delayed a whole bunch of stuff. Everyone had to learn to work from home. It was a different style of development. But for that reason, like you don't have to come to E3. Like we've decided that E3 is in June. You don't have to do anything now. Like you could just say like, okay, we're not going to have anything until August, and then save it.
Yeah, and anyone who's like upset that their games aren't coming, there's still a lot of games that are on the market right now. Like,
a ton of games. Like, there's so many games I can't like. There are games I look at. The Steam Next Fest started today.
Right.
I still have demos installed from the last Steam Next Fest, which I think was like 2 or 3 months ago. That I never got to play.
Maybe was it last year?
There was another festival of demos like within the last 6 months.
Okay.
Because that was the last time you played Windjammers.
Yeah, I played Windjammers. Was it over the holiday break? Maybe.
Yeah, so I think maybe it was in December. They did another Steam festival of demos. I still have those demos installed.
And you can't launch them.
And I haven't played. Well, I got rid of the ones that I couldn't launch. The ones that I could launch, I still have installed, and I haven't played most of them. So, like, that's the kind of, like, even just a demo, just a taste, is there are too many games, and there's a lot of great stuff out there for everybody.
For everyone, and that includes people who like smaller games too, like the indie scene. We had a strong showing this E3. There was the Guerrilla Collective 2. They showcased lots of games of all types. Following that was the Wholesome Games Direct that also showed tons of indie developers, and some of them got some pretty high profile placement at some of the Microsoft event. Yeah, what was the cyberpunk looking one? The 2D cyberpunk looking
replaced. So there were a couple of games that were like this new, I guess Square calls it 2D, 3D or something like that. HD 2D, that's it.
HD 2D.
Which is the we'll put a sprite on the background, we'll rotate it a bit, and usually there's a lot of bloom and heavy color saturation. Replaced as one of those.
Realistic lighting pixels.
Yeah. So there was that, and a game that I thought was called Sacrifice, but I think it's something else. That also looked like one of those Octopath Traveler games. Mecha Jammer, which also had that art style and looked like the old SNES Syndicate game.
Oh no, I didn't see this.
Yeah, so some of these are from, and I apologize for the determining which show they came from. The Future Game Show or the PC Gaming Show
right.
really just blurred together for me as just a big thing of PC indie games. So yeah, that was replaced Mecha Jammer and the other one. And then there was one called They Always Run, which was vaguely in the style of like Flashback or Out of This World, like that sort of.
I thought it was a superhero game at first, but it looks like it's a bit more like grimier and
yeah, I think it's like a bounty hunter game.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be, and that's the hook there. A whole bunch of strategy games. I'm a huge strategy fan. Dark Deity, which was faux Fire Emblem.
Okay.
Songs of Conquest, which was like a spiritual successor for Heroes of Might and Magic. And a lot of these, the hook definitely is, this developer of this game no longer does it. I'll do it myself. There's another game out there called Taiken, which is 100% just Pikmin again.
Oh yes, I did see that. Right. That's right. There's a bunch of like Harvest Moon / Animal Crossing games too. Like if you want to like raise crops and fish, your time has come. This is the year to play those games.
War Tales from the Northgard guys. There was one really interesting one. It's called Harold Halibut, which was a claymation puppet. And when you're seeing it running, you're like, wow, I wonder what kind of shaders or something they put over those 3D models to get the puppets to run like that. No, they had a little snippet at the end where they're like, yeah, we made puppets, we 3D scan them in, and then we run them using motion capture, like motion capture of people.
That was really cool.
It's doing some real wild shit.
And I had a feeling the compression on the stream wasn't even doing that any favors. I think it looked even better than I could tell that it looked from the trailer.
Chernobylite, which is another one of those we got Stalker 2 over at the Microsoft conference.
Mm-hmm.
Chernobylite is another one of that family of everything sad and Eastern European and let's go shoot things based on Roadside Picnic or the Stalker film, or and then I'm gonna end with Sega had Humankind, which I'll have more up on the site.
I just started the beta of that last night. I was messing around.
Yeah, it's dope.
Is that Sega's Civ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Amplitude, the guys behind Endless Legend and Endless Space, doing Civilization. And the twist this time is, instead of picking a single civilization and carrying that through every era, as you reach an era, you get a choice of about 10 different civilizations related to that era.
Okay.
Each with their own different perks and bonuses and unique building and unit. And so by the time you get to like era 5, your civilization is a mix of different civilizations across the era.
It's like amalgamation of, and they all have like bonuses associated and like archetypes. Like this is a scientific kind of society you're picking. Like you pick the Babylonians in the ancient age, they're good at science, you get science bonuses, and you can choose to like go all down that path or try to like balance your empire out a little more by
so like by like era 3 you'll be like an Olmec, Roman, Japanese Civilization. Like your Civilization will be a mix of all of those.
Oh, so that's kind of cool. They're just kind of throwing their own spin on Civ and not just making a
Right.
clone. Okay, that's
and
great.
and it's reflected in your city composition, because while your like generic buildings will change with the era and the civilization you pick, some of your larger structures and districts will remain in the same aesthetic from the previous civilization.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a real interesting play on it. I mean, it's still Civilization for the most part,
Right.
but it's definitely a new idea.
What do you think? It's a more, would it be fair to say, or maybe I'm just wrong, that Civ can be somewhat intimidating to people who are newcomers? Like, would it be a bit easier to get into, a more user-friendly version of Civ, this game?
It depends.
It's kind of as complex. I also think Civ has gotten very good at tutorials. So I think to me, some stuff that should have been a little more simple when I was starting Humankind, and this is just a beta. The explanation wasn't quite as easy as it could have been. The menus aren't quite as maybe clear as they could be. It's a little extra clicking than you need sometimes, I felt, but probably about as complicated as Civ, honestly.
Okay. And before we leave the topic of indies, I should plug the fact that it's a roundup on PCMag.com of some of E3's coolest, weirdest, and most badass indie games. Collection of games from the Microsoft conference, Guerrilla Collective, and the Wholesome showcase. And I have to point out about 2 or 3 that really caught my eye. One was called Serial Cleaners. It's set in the 90s, and you play a mob cleaner. And it's kind of like styled after like B movies and Tarantino gangster movies, and you pretty much like clean up after mob hits. And
so the trick here is it's a stealth game, and you are cleaning up after mob hits as the cops are there. So like you're trying to avoid them, but you're also like vacuuming up the blood and disposing of the bodies while you're avoiding the cops. It's wild.
Need to call in the wolf for that. There's also White Shadows, which was billed as a modern fable. It's like set in like this black and white, almost like metropolis-looking world where corporations are out of control, and the populace, which is made of like half animal, half human people, are just trying to survive. And that was one of the trends that I saw at E3 this year.
I think I saw that game.
Huh. There's a lot of black and white games this year that came out. There was that. There was this indie game. I forgot the name of it, but it was kind of like a Animal Crossing looking game that was also in black and white. I think. And it was that 2D game, action game, where you play a samurai, and it has like its own Kurosawa mode.
That's right.
Was it Road to Yomi or something like that?
Yes.
I'll find it. I know I saw that as well, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
It looked like a stylized like trailer was starting when they started showing that game, and then you realize that was just the game.
Right.
They're just showing gameplay at this point. One game I really like that has plenty of color, which has been shown before, was not new, but we did get more, and there is a demo out, which I did play, is Sable. And that's a very chill, non-combat sort of adventure game with some pretty charming dialogue and really cool art. I don't know what to call the visual style on that game, but it's simplistic yet really full of character.
It's very almost, there's a little cell shading, slightly heavier lines. It's the same style that another game that was indie, Ali Ali World, also uses that same style. And Ali Ali World is, of course, the next sequel in that endless runner skateboarding franchise, which we will have a preview up on the site at some point. So
say what?
A lot of studios just trying new things with the limited amount of not processing power, resources that they have compared to.
I'm glad we're getting away from every game being either pixel art, not that some of them don't look great, but they all started to look kind of similar, especially because half of them were like endless runners or roguelikes, and they just started to, in the mid 2010s and early 2010s, it's just like every indie game that came out kind of had that, and now really branching out to these like kind of experimental looks. Like there's I forget which game, was used. I forget what it was called. Is using the same visual style as kind of over is what it looks like. And that looked neat. I think Sable looks really cool and is really chill. So I'm excited. It's like a non-combat sort of adventure experience. So I think that game will be really neat to check out.
And you know, the AAA and B tier publishers are taking up the let's all do the same thing at once now with the Left 4 Dead games.
I was about to say
Blood, Redfall, all that stuff.
Anacrusis.
Anacrusis.
The indie one, yeah.
Can for a minute, can I gripe about something for a minute, please?
You can.
Naming conventions for some of these games like really messed me up this E3. There was Solstice, SOUL, Solstice.
Mm-hmm.
There was Eldest Souls, is indie game. And Mike, you wrote about what was it, Elder Souls?
Oh, Elden Ring. I wrote about Elden Ring.
Yes. So I was trying to like take notes for these various games, and I was getting them all just confused. So I had to like double and triple check all these names. But can we please, like, you know, diversify? We know Souls are popular.
It's like not only is the gameplay Souls like, now all the names are starting to be Souls like too.
Yeah. Speaking of Souls like, Tunic, which looks like Zelda but plays like Souls. That demo is available right now on
that game looks really
Xbox. I will warn you, it is not as easy as the aesthetic says. And then Devolver Digital also had Death's Door, which was another interesting looking Souls like, or maybe more hyper light drifter. Hard to tell, but I think there's a demo out for that as well, which is I'm gonna try.
Okay. And you know, like we said before, there were games for everyone. Like between like the low cost indie games, between subscribing to Game Pass, to the high end AAA games, there's something out there for you.
Indies really had a time, and I think related to what we were saying about third-party studios not being ready for COVID or ready to handle it. I think in some ways, as far as I'm sure it was also really challenging. I think indies maybe were set up better process-wise to not have to go through all this infrastructural, like how do we get all our employees working remote? What do? We don't have resources. You know, there's no need for an IT department if it's like a 2-person studio, and everyone was kind of maybe was working from home already for a lot of indie developers, and they were forced to, I mean, obviously it sucked to be stuck home, but if they had nothing to do but work on their game, then no wonder we saw 1 million games out this E3 from indie developers. So
yeah, they don't really have to worry about motion capture. Troy Baker recording his lines. You know, they're in a good spot. To kind of wrap this things up, and we kind of touched upon this before, E3 isn't what it used to be now. Now I don't mean in terms of like in a negative way. E3 used to be basically a week-long celebration of games, but now that's kind of like expanded. You have the Summer Game Fest, you have E3 itself, you have other independent showcases, you have Sony doing their own show. Do you prefer the old way of like, this is going to be a week of hype, or like a month to a month and a half of more of a hype and a bit of a trickle? You prefer a summer game or a week of strong hype?
I don't mind the summer thing and studios having their own events and things, but I feel like it needs to settle. I don't know if this period will kind of peak and then settle back down, but there needs to be some more organization among them for how many of these different things there are, because at a certain point you don't either remember what's coming up or know what you're looking at, or you're like, is Summer of Games, is that Keely's thing? No, that's what IGN is running, or, you know, vice versa. And then, you know, there's Sony holding its own event, and then it just kind of, there's like always an event, and it's cool. You're like, oh, I guess they're showing a thing that mattered at this like a big game at this event. I didn't really know to expect that. Whereas E3, it's like, here are all the days planned out. The studios are all going to show their games. In some aspect, I like the organization of that a bit more, but it is cool that companies should feel free to just show their stuff off in their own things when they have it. I just think there's kind of a mass surge of sheer volume of these pressers and different branded events right now that kind of need to coalesce a little bit. But I don't know if we're going to see traditional E3. A lot of people think it's as these companies spin off that it's just going to kind of come apart, and we might not need to do it in physical in physical space anymore if everyone can just do it digitally. So
yeah, the benefit of E3 as a physical thing is at least the developers and publishers can be like, well, for at least this week and change, everyone is in LA, even if we're not at like EA Play isn't at E3,
right?
But it is around E3 because they know we're all there, and that's mostly the benefit, and that's why digital E3 doesn't really add anything. I do think that yes, having a number of these back to back, especially if you don't have anything to show, just wait until you do, because otherwise it just makes you look bad compared to those who do have something to show that are ready to throw out haymakers. Like you can do it at any time. I this year so far at least is better than last year's digital E3, which was like a serious sustained month and a half of just stuff. Like this year, it definitely seems to be that everyone tried to cram what little stuff they had into these couple of days that count as E3, and then there's not as much after.
Right.
Whereas like last year, it was like there's E3, and then here's Keeley's thing, and then here's the IGN thing, and it was literally just like a month and a half of just trailers and interviews and demos.
Yeah, I'll say that professionally, I like the nice tight E3. I know when to start, I know when to finish. You know, I can plan my days well. But as a fan, I kind of like the more drawn out E3. There's like new announcements like every couple of days or couple of weeks.
Yeah, maybe if we didn't have to pay as much constant attention to all this stuff, we'd feel slightly different. But it's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot to keep track of for sure. We saw a lot more gameplay. I think E3, 1 or 2 E3s ago, there was that scourge of just like announcing a thing with like a 5-second like CGI sting, and then that got really annoying. So we saw a good amount of gameplay.
And we still got some of that. Like one of the like I'm real like surprised. Like Redfall from Arcane got a ton of hype. There was no gameplay in that trailer. Like it at least gave us some idea of what type of game it is, so we can extrapolate. But it wasn't like they showed anything. There was Contraband, which is the game from the Just Cause folks. That was also just an entirely CG trailer. There were a couple of just like, okay, yeah.
Maybe because this was the year of stuff being delayed before now that they did all that. Now they actually have gameplay to show. So,
right.
And like Nintendo and Ubisoft didn't have that problem because again, they focus on games that are closer, near term. Like even Breath of the Wild was light on Breath of the Wild 2 was light on details. But you can tell it's all in engine. Like, okay, that's what the game looks like.
Right. And speaking of which, we have an article. By the time you see this video, article should be up focusing on why Breath of the Wild 2 may be signaling a second generation for the Nintendo Switch. So check that out on PCMag.com. And guys, thank you. It's been a pretty decent E3, would say.
A good show overall. A couple bummers, but some bangers. Nintendo and Microsoft held it down for the majority of it, but a ton of good indie games and some other titles supplemented the rest. So pretty solid show overall.
A cross-section of games and a good cross-section of people. I'm Jeff Wilson for PC Mag. This is Matt Buzzy, Mike Williams, and we'll see you next time.